One of the most difficult things that you can do is to live according to your convictions, live according to your ideas, and live according to your principles. That is probably the most challenging thing to do because you're going to be tested in every sense of the word. You're going to be tested in your commitment to those things. You're going to be tested on whether or not you were actually right. And only time will tell on whether you stood on the right convictions. And particularly in this political season, I got a lot of backlash for voting for President Trump. And I didn't vote for President Trump because I love Trump or I'm a diehard Republican or diehard conservative or any of that. I voted for President Trump for three reasons. And the thing is, people try to shame me for the reasons that I voted for this man. If it's anything that we've seen from President Trump is that he has delivered on so many of his promises and campaign initiatives and some of the things that were in Project 2025. In one sense, people feel lied to. In other sense, people feel deceived. In other sense, people are like, I told you so that this was going to happen. But I know that so many people chose to focus on the wrong things. They chose to focus on 80% of the ideological issues and 20% of the economic issues. I voted for Trump for three reasons: crypto, business and tax policy, and the Second Amendment. Those three things. So many people ridiculed me and laughed at me, calling me a crypto bro and, oh, you're one of those, oh, this, that, and the third. And it only showed to me that their ignorance of the space and their ignorance of what crypto can do for them. If you look now that many of the altcoins are up 100%, basically, if you invested just in January, February, March, April, May, June, you've doubled your money at minimum, depending on what you invested in, right? And it took time. The next thing with business and tax policy is that this is probably the best period in which to become a government contractor, to have a business, and to really take advantage of the tax code. Third, the Second Amendment. Suppressors and short barrel rifles, the $200 tax that used to be on there is no longer going to be on there either at the end of the year or 90 days, one of the two. So I focused on the three hills on which I could live on. And I know that there's so many people that are disappointed with how things are going. They're disappointed with the Department of Education. They're disappointed with what's going on with ICE. They're disappointed with all those things. And you have to really understand where your money comes from. You have to understand what makes things tick. And sometimes you're blessed where things go your way, and other times you have to roll with the punches. So many Americans didn't know how to roll with the punches, and I think that is the greatest indicator of where American life is at. That the American dream is dependent upon who's in office. And that's not the America that many people remember. That's not the America that was great. That America was only great depending on who was president, versus America being great already and being greater depending on who was in office, but still being great regardless of who was in office. This is the degradation in American society that my generation wasn't prepared for. The newer generation is preparing for, and the generation even after that is saying, we want to build something new because whatever y'all doing ain't working. Now that the millennials are coming into their 30s, late 30s, and early 40s, we're now faced with how do we create the world for ourselves where we can prosper, where we can grow without stealing from the next generation. And I never understood what people meant when they said that all the debt that we incurred over the last 20, 30 years was stealing from generations. What happens is when you take on debt, that debt is at an interest rate, and that debt has to be repaid. And whenever that debt is not repaid and kicked down the can, then the amount just continues to grow because of interest. When that amount starts to grow, it makes it difficult for people to buy houses. Everything around you gets more expensive. It becomes more expensive to even have the American dream, let alone live an American life. The American dream was a home with a white picket fence with what, 1.7 kids or 2.3 kids? How expensive is it to have that? How many of us can actually afford a home? Or how many of us can afford an apartment, can afford to pay $16, $17, $18, $2,000 for an apartment, but don't qualify to buy a house at those same mortgage prices? The American dream isn't just about your income, it's about your wealth, it's about your assets, it's about your debt to income ratio. And we've made the American dream dependent upon who's president, which lets us know that America strayed from its principles. It strayed from its principles of independence. It strayed from its principles of being America first. It strayed from its principles of making sure that the American people are taken care of first and foremost before we even look to anybody else to help. This particular administration has made it very difficult in a number of spaces. Climate tech, right? In any place that's talking about renewable energy or climate technology, a lot of investment has gone down. So not only was there an attack on the space, but there's secondary and tertiary effects that affects entrepreneurs that are in the climate tech space. And if that affects entrepreneurs in the climate tech space, it affects investors in the climate tech space. And if it affects investors in the climate tech space, it affects the United States being a leader in those particular spaces. There's some short-sighted vision in this particular administration that is going to hurt America. The other part of it is that there's other places where there's opportunity. So there has been this disinvestment or divestment from clean energy and this new investment in nuclear energy, which presents investment options and opportunities for the average American. There's been a disinvestment or divestment in education, in public education, which presents an opportunity for private education. We talk about how school is going to be less affordable. And I think that school is already unaffordable in the sense that part of the American dream or part of the American promise was that if you get education, you'll get a high-paying job. If you go to college, you'll get a high-paying job. That promise has been broken. So now that education has skyrocketed and you don't get the ROI that you used to get on having a college degree or having a college education, it's going to force not only schools to rethink their business model and their value proposition, but it's also going to force learners to reevaluate what's actually important and what skills do I need to have in order to be successful in this world. This particular administration and what's going on in the years to come is going to create a level of entrepreneurship and can do attitude that we have not seen in many years. But it's going to come at the expense of a lot of pain, a lot of confusion, a lot of hurt, and unfortunately, a lot of people getting left behind or becoming irrelevant. The only people who shouldn't be left behind and who should always have a chance are the young people. Because so much of their decisions, so much of their life is controlled by the decisions of adults. That the children should be given a chance to thrive. That instead of college degrees, that they should be getting certificate programs. That instead of counseling that tells them to follow their passions, finding a way of connecting their passions to technology and learning technology that's associated with their passion. Learning how to utilize AI, how to use AI agents, how to code, how to prompt engineer, and how to apply that to their everyday lives. The future looks bright, despite the clouds that are gathered ahead. Be strong, be vigilant, be diligent.